Hello YouTube. I have some updates about the Dyatlov Pass case from 1959, so I'll get straight to the point. Just wanted to add that if you want to see my previous investigations of this most complicated case, I have attached links to the description for this video. Now, it's about Valentin Degteryov, who is a long-time Dyatlov Pass investigator in Russia. And he entertained several hypotheses about the deaths of the Dyatlov group participants. Here's the latest one. Degteryov told Russian media recently that he has a very large archive of hundreds of photographs, thousands of pages of various documents, clippings from various newspapers collected over the years. All of them are connected with the well-known Soviet tragedy of the 20th century, the death of 9 tourists in the remote Ural Mountains taiga area back in 1959. He is one of many who dream to reveal the secret of the Dyatlov Pass, to solve the case. Degteryov's latest findings, it has to do with a photograph. This is an archival photograph, probably taken by someone from the Ural Polytechnical Institute, some of the Sverdlovsk students who took part in the search project in the late February or early March of 1959. Someone who is really unknown at this time, and we're not sure if we ever will find out. He took a picture, or she took a picture of the forest in the area of that very cedar tree where they found the first group of dead people, of dead tourists. This photo is not one of those that are often published, according to Degteryov. But he says you can find it, albeit with difficulty, of course. Perhaps someone already found this artifact, so to say, and published an article about it. The Russian researcher does not know for sure because he does not have access to publicly available information due to a number of serious reasons. He's had his confrontations with those who have studied this phenomenon. Therefore, Degteryov asks for forgiveness if he again insulted someone with this development and so forth. Degteryov believes that this find belongs only to him, since it was he who found it, the photograph. Therefore, he does not accept any complaints. Now, in the photo, there is a panoramic shot of the cedar forest. Fresh tracks in the snow are clearly visible, traces too large for human beings. This is clearly visible even in this old photograph. Under the tree sits waist deep in snow the real Bigfoot, that's what he called it, the very Menkv, about which there are many legends and traditions. One can see that it has broad shoulders, it is covered with dark, apparently thick hair. In the area of the face, the hair is either not at all there, or it is most likely of white color. It doesn't attack the photographer, as it is smart enough and careful, this creature. The photograph, fortunately for him, too, did not see the creature when he took that picture. Degteryov actually took one picture and its negative projection. This is definitely not a snowdrift or a rock, but not a bear either. The error is absolutely excluded, according to the Russian researcher. The photograph is genuine and it's archival. Degteryov added that if the fund of Kuntsevich, the Dyatlov Group Memory Fund, did not sell its original, then it can be found in their archive, although he is not sure about it. That's Degteryov's statement, so I'm not going to get into this, but I do want to mention that Degteryov recalled a recent report from winter of 2019 from the Dyatlov Pass area. There was this old grandmother, the native grandmother of Mansi, that's the indigenous tribe that resides in the area, of Valera Anyamov. Incidentally, she spoke in great detail, this grandmother, about the fact that tourists could have been killed by that very Menkov, that's the name of the creature we know as snowman, Yeti, and so forth, which in her words always lived in this place, the creature. Degteryov did not take her story seriously. At the time, he remembered it only after this find, after this photograph, this fascinating photograph according to him. And he says that in the Dyatlov Pass science, it is customary to justify versions for any find. Therefore, Degteryov will continue this tradition. The Dyatlov group left their tent because of some element, something that caused them to leave it. At the same time, they went down carefully, as it was very difficult not to fall in the snow. In the forest near the cedar, they were attacked by the same snowmen who could live there. The creature killed only those who resisted it. That's how Degteryov supports his hypothesis or version. So I will leave this update and I will go on to another one. That there is another explanation nowadays in Russia among some so-called armchair researchers about the cause of the death of the Dyatlov group. And they claim that the Dyatlov's group was killed, they were killed by a secret climate weapon, but not a Soviet one. One of the versions of the death of the Dyatlov group is associated with tests of secret weapons in the Ural mountains. Proponents of this version believe that a ballistic missile exploded somewhere high in the stratosphere, and the group died because it accidentally ended up in the area of the explosion. Excuse me. True, it is unclear why there was a need to test weapons in the northern Urals at all, when for this, in the Soviet Union, there were many special secret training grounds equipped with top-notch technical equipment and everything else needed for the tests. And also the opening of the 21st Communist Party Congress that put the so-called the end to the version of serious military tests. Well, at the time, well, at least according to some people in modern Russia. For example, Nikolai Andreev, Russian writer, states the following: this was a grandiose Communist Party event, this Congress. Among the delegates to the Congress were all the leaders of party organizations, all the leaders of nuclear and missile projects, designers. Training missile launches at the time could be carried out, but no tests would be carried out, no way. There could be no tests because the main developers of such weapons were sitting in the Kremlin at the time and listening to Khrushchev's report, denouncing Stalinist crimes and so forth. Now, according to another version, since the training missions at this time were not cancelled, tourists could be killed by a missile for some reason deviating from a given trajectory. However, it is obvious that if the missile was there, then it did not fall at the Dyatlov Pass. Otherwise, the rescuers would have discovered the traces of the fall and the missile or rocket fuel. In addition, from Baikonur and the Kapustin Yar training ground, missiles would fly at completely different paths, trajectories. Yevgeny Buyanov, Russian writer, added, all missile launches are now known. At that time, there were no launches in that direction. This is clearly now known today. It's clear. On those rocket fragments that were found from 5 to 30 kilometers, They arrived much later from the Plesets cosmodrome. So there were many odd things in the incident investigation itself. I mentioned it before. The Dyatlov's group embarked on their journey on January 25, 1959, and the search for tourists began on February 22nd. But there is a document from which it follows that the investigation began on February 6. That is 3 weeks before the alarm was ever raised about the disappearance of the Dyatlov Pass group. Former investigator of the prosecutor's office, Leonid Proshkin, even stated that, in fact, there were 2 criminal cases about the death of the Dyatlov group's participants. One was pretentious and the other investigation was real. The strange behavior or conduct of the investigation team, experts, the leadership of the Sverdlovsk region, and the special group of detectives from Moscow can only be plausibly explained. The authorities themselves did not understand what happened at that pass, at the Dyatlov Pass. So the hypothesis appeared that it was still a test of secret weapons. But it was not the Soviet military who conducted it. Now there are people who are putting forward this idea in Russia, but the Americans, and the Dyatlov's group was killed by a secret climate weapon from the United States. So, in my youth in the USSR, I've heard a lot of this BS. I remember such idiotic and psychotic Soviet myths about the Americans poisoning Soviet populations through secret tests, etc. Unfortunately, we have too much of such gibberish around the world. I've traveled, when possible, to a number of countries. After I left the USSR, I did some field research, and I gotta tell you that I've sadly observed how little people know about other cultures and nations, and how eagerly some embrace conspiracy theories. But my job is to bring forth the latest in the Dyatlov Pass investigation in Russia in the framework of overall paranormal phenomena of Eurasia. And this is a very, very unusual case. As you know, those who have listened to my tapes and read other sources. So, what else is new? Specialists who have been studying the causes of the mysterious death of Igor Dyatlov's tourist group for many years have come to new conclusions. According to them, a technogenic, that's the word they use in Russia, or man-made catastrophe could have forced students to leave the tent half naked and run away from it with lightning speed. For example, some aircraft allegedly exploded near the area, releasing poisonous fumes. Experts called a new version of the death of members of the tourist group whose bodies were the Igor Dyatlov's group, whose bodies were found in northern Ural in 1959. Now, according to those who did the search and relatives of the victims, the cause of the deaths of the students was a man-made disaster. The cause of the death of the Dyatlov group, comprised largely of students and graduates of the Ural Polytechnic Institute. Again, it remains one of the great main mysteries of the USSR and Russia in the 20th century. Tourists did not return to the base on the appointed day, after which, at the end of February, 4 corpses with injuries were found at different distances from the tent by volunteer searchers, full-time rescuers, and the Mansi hunters who joined them. Sergei Sogrin, who was the USSR Master of Sports in mountaineering, was among the first to be at the scene of the accident. According to him, a group of rescuers explored the area in a very thorough manner. So he said, first, they all agreed that this was a man-made disaster. So they get to the area and they agree immediately that it was a man-made disaster. True, at the time, this term was not yet known in 1959, technogenic, but it was clear that something scared them from the air. and something of terrestrial origin, he said during a press conference in Yekaterinburg. Sogrin also noted that a rocket or missile or a spent rocket stage could become an object that suddenly appeared in the area. In addition, a certain aircraft could make a sound that human ears could not stand, so the group was forced to leave the tent. Previously, searchers working on the site of the tragedy in 1959 also drew attention to the peculiar state of the snow around the tent of the dead tourists. It was covered with a crust of ice. In addition, human traces were clearly visible on it. According to one version, such a state of snow cover was a consequence of the alleged explosion of the aircraft. First, it melted from the outbreak of heat and then abruptly returned to solid state. The reason was understood only indirectly. Most likely, during a man-made disaster, a poisonous substance was released, fuel or combustion products, which made them leave the tent with lightning speed at night, without really dressing up and not wearing shoes. One thing was clear, that staying there was deadly for them. Everything else that happened to them is just a consequence of this, Sogrin said in his press interview. Another confirmation of his words was the testimony of tourists from other tourist groups who were also in the neighboring area and route at the same time as the Dyatlov group. They all remember the strange glow in the sky. Igor Dyatlov's sister also spoke about the fact that their parents were always told the same thing. The group members left the tent and lived no more than 2 hours afterwards, and the cause of their death was allegedly frostbite. Nevertheless, neither they nor any of the other families of their lost relatives could see the real documents with the conclusions of the doctors. This was according to the Russian private investigator and writer Oleg Arkhipov. According to him, after the discovery of the first 5 corpses of dead tourists, a forensic chemical, histological and radiological examination was carried out, and the results of which were never allowed to be known to anyone, to be declassified, so to say. As soon as the results were ready, people in gray coats immediately came. They seized not only the acts of expert examinations themselves, which are not currently in the case, in the file, but also samples of organs taken from the deceased for research. Again, this is according to Arkhipov. In connection with this and many other circumstances, the Dyatlov Group Memory Fund, which represents the interest of the deceased tourists, has already announced its intention to write an appeal requesting that they start from scratch the criminal investigation into the incident. And Igor Krasnov, the new prosecutor general of the Russian Federation, is the one that will get this appeal. But on February 1st of this year, 60 years after the tragedy, the prosecutor general of the Russian Federation decided to return to the old investigation into the circumstances of the deaths of tourists in 1959. Prosecutors who renewed the test deny the criminal, technogenic or man-made and conspiracy theories, working out only 3 theories: avalanche, hurricanes, and the so-called snowboard. And I've explained it in my previous videos. I'd like you to pay attention to them. I had about 3 or 4 in the last 6 months. Now, in 2015, the investigation of the mysterious death of the tourist at the initiative of the investigative committee was also carried out by forensic scientist Vladimir Solovyov and an honorary employee of the department, mountaineer with more than 25 climbs in his experience, Sergei Skrabat, and forensic managed to establish the passage of the atmospheric front lasted at least 10 hours and was accompanied by heavy snowfall, increased winds to a hurricane force, 20 to 30 meters per second, and a drop of temperature to minus 40 Celsius. So in their opinion, the reason for the flight of the tourists from the tent was a small avalanche, which Dyatlov and the company partially provoked themselves, cutting the slope during the preparation for the night. So again, those are some of the latest updates from Russia, and I will of course keep my eyes open, and my ears open to other developments in Russia and in the Ural Mountains about this very, very, very strange and very sad tragedy. But this case was more than strange, and there are very unusual explanations that are being proposed for it. I thank you for your attention. If you can support my research, there are links in the description as on how you can do this, and we'll speak again.